Have you ever wondered how Native American wisdom could be twisted into something that would change modern warfare forever? What if I told you that right now, beneath your feet, the deadly legacy of a hidden Cherokee design continues to influence the weapons that protect and threaten our nation? The secret connection between ancient tribal knowledge and America's most devastating weapon has remained classified for decades. Until now. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below telling me your state or country. And if you want to help us continue uncovering these hidden chapters of American history, please hit that subscribe button. We need your support to keep bringing these classified stories to light. The first rays of dawn broke through the mist hanging over the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina in April of 1942. Dr. Thomas Harrington, a military engineer from the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, stood at the edge of what remained of an ancient Cherokee settlement. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he unfolded a topographical map marked with faded red circles and cryptic notations. "This can't be coincidental," he whispered to Colonel James Weatherford, who stood beside him with arms folded skeptically across his chest. The spatial arrangement matches perfectly. What these two men discovered that morning would forever alter the course of American military technology and claim countless lives across global battlefields. It began with an obscure archaeological expedition, but would culminate in the creation of the M67, a weapon system so deadly that some of its specifications remain classified even today. The story begins 3 months earlier at Princeton University, where Dr. Harrington, an engineer with an unusual background in anthropology, was reviewing geographical surveys of Native American settlements for the War Department. His task was mundane: assess terrain patterns for potential training grounds, but what he discovered was anything but ordinary. "I noticed it first in the layout of a preserved Cherokee mountain village near the present-day town of Murphy," Dr. Harrington later wrote in his personal journal, now declassified and housed in the National Archives. The spatial relationship between the central council house and the surrounding dwellings formed a mathematical ratio that perfectly solved a problem we'd been struggling with in weapons development. The problem he referenced had plagued firearms engineers since World War I: how to create a lightweight machine gun capable of sustained fire without overheating or jamming. Every attempt had failed due to fundamental issues with heat distribution and mechanical timing. The breakthrough came not from modern engineering, but from a 700-year-old village design. The Cherokee understood something about energy flow and distribution that we're only beginning to grasp with our modern physics, noted Dr. Elizabeth Whitecloud, one of the few Cherokee consultants brought into the classified project in 1944. Her handwritten notes, recently discovered in a forgotten filing cabinet at Fort Benning, reveal the government's growing excitement and moral conflict about weaponizing indigenous knowledge. The village that captivated Harrington's attention had been constructed with a sophisticated understanding of wind patterns, solar positioning, and thermal regulation. The buildings weren't placed randomly, but followed a precise mathematical relationship that maximized heating in winter and cooling in summer. Most crucially, the design incorporated a unique spiral pattern that controlled energy distribution through the entire settlement. Colonel Weatherford, initially dismissive of Harrington's mystical nonsense, became a convert after seeing the first prototype. "I've never witnessed anything like it," he wrote in a classified memo to the Secretary of War in October 1943. "The firing mechanism, based on the Cherokee design principles, operates with an efficiency that defies our current understanding of mechanical engineering. The weapon doesn't just work, it works in ways our best scientists can't fully explain." The prototype became known as Project Thunderbird, a nod to the Cherokee legends that spoke of powerful sky beings. A team of 47 engineers, metallurgists, and weapons specialists worked in a converted warehouse in Hartford, Connecticut, far from prying eyes and potential spies. Martha Kingsley, one of the few female engineers allowed on the project, kept an unofficial diary that provides rare insight into the development process. The central firing pin assembly mimics the spiral pattern of the village's pathways, she wrote. When we machine the components to match the exact proportions of the council house to outlying structures, the mechanism achieves perfect timing. It's as though the ancient Cherokee somehow understood principles of thermodynamics and energy transfer that we've only discovered in the last century. By early 1944, field tests confirmed what the development team had scarcely dared to believe. The prototype could fire over 800 rounds per minute with minimal barrel wear, virtually no jamming, and unprecedented accuracy. The weapon operated with a distinctly different sound than other machine guns. Witnesses described it as a continuous thunder rather than individual shots. Lieutenant Gregory Pearson was among the first combat soldiers to test the weapon at the secret range in the New Mexico desert. "It felt alive in my hands," he wrote to his brother in a letter intercepted and classified by military intelligence. "There's something unnatural about how it operates, like it knows what it's doing. Some of the men refuse to handle it after dark. They say it whispers." What made the weapon truly revolutionary wasn't just its rate of fire or reliability. The Cherokee-inspired design solved the heat dissipation problem that had plagued machine guns since their invention. While conventional weapons concentrated heat in the barrel, this design dispersed thermal energy through the entire mechanism in a spiraling pattern, just as the village had distributed heat and resources through its circular arrangement. By mid-1944, the War Department ordered full production under extreme secrecy. The weapon would not be deployed in the European theater, but was instead designated for potential use in the Pacific, and, most ominously, for what military planners called domestic security contingencies. Dr. Harrington's enthusiasm for the project began to wane as production ramped up. His personal journals reveal growing discomfort with how indigenous knowledge was being repurposed. "We've taken something sacred and life-sustaining and perverted it into a killing machine," he wrote in April 1945. The village design was meant to nurture community and harmony with nature. "We've inverted its very purpose." His concerns found an unexpected ally in Dr. William Stillwater, a Cherokee physicist who had been brought into the project's inner circle in early 1945. Stillwater's official reports praised the weapon's effectiveness, but his private communications with tribal elders, later collected by the FBI under Operation Paperclip Extension, told a different story. "They have stolen the heart of our ancestors' wisdom," he wrote in Cherokee to Elder Joseph Blackfeather. "The sacred spiral that moves through all life has been captured in metal and gunpowder. There will be consequences beyond their understanding." Those consequences would soon become apparent to the project team. During extended firing tests in the summer of 1945, operators began reporting unusual phenomena. The weapons achieved impossible accuracy, sometimes hitting targets that weren't directly aimed at. More disturbing were the psychological effects. Gunners complained of vivid nightmares, waking hallucinations, and the persistent feeling that the weapons were communicating with them. "After firing the prototype for 30 minutes, I could feel it guiding my hands," reported Sergeant Frank Delano. "I hit targets I couldn't even see." Later that night, I dreamed of ancient villages burning and heard voices speaking in a language I've never heard, but somehow understood. Military psychiatrists dismissed these reports as combat stress or overactive imaginations, but Dr. Stillwater recognized something his colleagues missed. The Cherokee believed that objects could retain the spirits of their makers or the essence of their original purpose, he explained in a restricted briefing that was promptly buried. "By copying the sacred patterns of the village, you've created a conduit for energies you don't understand." As the war in the Pacific intensified, pressure mounted to deploy the new weapon despite these concerning reports. In June 1945, the first production models, now designated the XM-17, were shipped to forward operating bases in the Philippines. The results were devastating but tinged with inexplicable events. Marine Captain Howard Teller commanded one of the first units equipped with the new weapon. His after-action report described its effectiveness with clinical precision. Enemy positions were neutralized with unprecedented efficiency. A bunker network that would typically require an hour of concentrated fire and multiple casualties to clear was eliminated in under 3 minutes with 0 friendly casualties. What he omitted from the official report, but later shared with Dr. Harrington, was more troubling. The Japanese soldiers didn't just die. They surrendered by the dozens, many in a state of extreme psychological distress. Prisoners reported seeing their ancestors in the flashes of gunfire, hearing their names called by dead relatives. Some were found wandering in a trance-like state, repeating phrases in what linguists later identified as archaic Cherokee. As Allied forces prepared for the anticipated invasion of Japan, the XM-17 was positioned to become the decisive weapon of the Pacific War. Production increased despite growing reports of anomalies associated with its use. Gunners reported that the weapons grew warm even when not fired, that they sometimes fired a single shot on their own when pointed at hidden enemy positions, and that the distinctive sound they made couldn't be recorded by any available technology. "It's as if they exist partially in another realm," wrote Dr. Harrington in what would be his final entry on the project. "We've created something that bridges worlds in ways we never intended." The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki brought the war to an abrupt end before the full deployment of the XM-17. With peacetime approaching, military leaders faced a dilemma: what to do with a weapon that was simultaneously the most effective ever created and increasingly viewed as unpredictable and potentially dangerous to its users. In December 1945, a classified directive ordered all XM-17 prototypes and production models collected and transported to a secure facility beneath Fort Detrick, Maryland. Official records indicated that the program was terminated due to prohibitive production costs and redundant tactical application. The truth, pieced together from declassified documents and the testimony of project survivors, was far more disturbing. During the weapons transportation to Fort Detrick, an entire train car containing 37 units vanished while passing through Cherokee territory in western North Carolina. The military conducted a massive search operation disguised as a training exercise, but no trace of the missing weapons was ever found. More alarming were the reports from soldiers who had extensively used the weapons. Veterans from test units experienced unusually high rates of sleep disorders, with many reporting the same recurring dream: standing in an ancient village as a storm approached, hearing voices speaking in Cherokee, warning of a balance disturbed. Dr. Stillwater, whose role in the project remained classified until 1978, eventually returned to the Cherokee Nation and became a spiritual leader, known for healing veterans suffering from what would later be called post-traumatic stress disorder. When interviewed by military historians in 1968, he offered a cryptic assessment of Project Thunderbird. "You cannot borrow the sacred without accepting its conditions," he said. "The village pattern was designed to maintain harmony between worlds. When you use it to create discord, the pattern itself will seek to restore balance." The story of the Cherokee-inspired weapon might have remained buried in classified archives forever, if not for a series of inexplicable incidents beginning in 1967. During the Vietnam War, American forces encountered enemy weapons with distinctly familiar firing mechanisms. Captured Viet Cong machine guns contained internal components arranged in the same distinctive spiral pattern as the XM-17, despite no known technology transfer. More disturbing were the reports from special operations teams who claimed to hear whispered Cherokee words in the jungle at night, often preceding enemy ambushes. Weapons recovered from these ambush sites often contained components that metallurgists confirmed were manufactured in American factories during World War II. Parts from the missing XM-17 units. In 1971, a classified Pentagon investigation codenamed Broken Arrow sought to determine how American weapon technology had reached North Vietnamese forces. Their findings, partially declassified in 2006, suggested something more unsettling than espionage or technology transfer. The distinctive components appear to manifest in proximity to significant violence, the report stated. Material analysis indicates the metal itself is identical to the original production, despite being manufactured decades apart. We cannot explain how these components are appearing in current conflict zones. Meanwhile, in the mountains of North Carolina, Cherokee elders maintained their silence about the weapons that had disappeared in their territory. The only acknowledgement came in 1973, when Elder Joseph Blackfeather, then 94 years old, spoke to a cultural anthropologist recording traditional stories. "The thunder weapons have returned to the earth," he said. "The metal remembers its true purpose. The spiral always returns to its center." By the mid-1970s, the legacy of Project Thunderbird had evolved from a classified weapons program into something far more mysterious. Veterans who had handled the XM-17 continued to report unexplainable phenomena decades after their service. Many found themselves inexplicably drawn to Cherokee territories, often traveling hundreds of miles without clear reason, only to arrive in the mountains of North Carolina with a sense of completion they couldn't articulate. Former Army Specialist Raymond Dietz, who had served as a test operator in 1944, was found in 1977, living in a remote cabin just 3 miles from the original village site that had inspired the weapon's design. Local Cherokee knew him as the Quiet Guardian, who seemed to appear whenever archaeological teams approached certain sacred areas. "He doesn't speak much," reported Dr. Sarah Littletree, a Cherokee archaeologist who encountered Dietz during a survey. "But when I mentioned the old settlement patterns, he grabbed my wrist and said, 'The thunder has not finished speaking.'" Then he walked away into the forest. The tribal elders seem to know him, but they won't discuss why he's here or what he's guarding. The Pentagon's interest in Project Thunderbird might have remained dormant, if not for a startling discovery in 1978 during the excavation of a Viet Cong tunnel complex near the Cambodian border. An American archaeological team, working to recover war artifacts, discovered a hidden chamber containing what appeared to be a makeshift shrine. At its center lay one of the missing XM-17 prototypes, partially disassembled, with the components arranged in the exact pattern of the original Cherokee village. Around the weapon were dozens of carved wooden tablets, inscribed with a mixture of Vietnamese and Cherokee syllabary. When translated, they told a disturbing story. Vietnamese fighters claimed the weapon had appeared during a monsoon in 1968, accompanied by spirit warriors who walked between raindrops. More alarming were reports that the weapon functioned without ammunition, producing a thunder that killed without bullets during a battle against American forces near Khe Sanh. Dr. Michael Redbird, one of the few Cherokee scholars with security clearance, was brought in to analyze the findings. His report to military intelligence, declassified in 2010, outlined connections that mainstream science was reluctant to acknowledge. "The weapon design didn't just mimic the village layout," he wrote. "It recreated the spiritual technology embedded in that arrangement." The Cherokee understood that certain geometric patterns serve as conduits between the physical and spiritual realms. By manufacturing these patterns in metal and integrating them with mechanisms designed for destruction, the original project created a technological bridge that violated fundamental spiritual laws. Throughout the 1980s, as the original Project Thunderbird faded from institutional memory, strange incidents continued to connect the weapon's legacy to its Cherokee origins. In 1982, a surveyor for the Tennessee Valley Authority disappeared while mapping an area near the original village site. When found 3 weeks later, He had no memory of his disappearance, but had filled 7 notebooks with detailed technical drawings of firing mechanisms and spiral patterns that matched classified XM-17 schematics he could not possibly have seen. The man, Edward Collins, had no military background or engineering training. When questioned by FBI agents, he insisted the designs came to him in dreams where ancient men in Cherokee clothing guided his hand. More disturbing were the modifications his drawings suggested, improvements to the original design that weapons experts determined would make the already formidable weapon nearly 100% efficient, a mechanical impossibility by contemporary engineering standards. Dr. Eleanor Gray, a quantum physicist who later gained access to the Collins drawings through her Pentagon clearance, noted something her military colleagues had missed. The spiral patterns in these new designs don't just improve the weapon's mechanical efficiency, she wrote in a restricted memo. They suggest a mechanism for transferring energy that violates our current understanding of thermodynamics. If built, such a device wouldn't just fire projectiles, it would generate and channel energy in ways more consistent with theoretical physics than practical engineering. By the late 1980s, what remained of Project Thunderbird had been absorbed into classified weapons research programs scattered across various military branches. The institutional knowledge had fragmented, but the essence of the Cherokee-inspired design began appearing in multiple advanced weapon systems, often introduced by engineers who could not fully explain their design inspirations. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Patterson, who oversaw the Army's Advanced Weapons Division from 1985 to 1991, documented this phenomenon in his personal journals, which were discovered after his suicide in 2002. Engineers keep independently developing components based on the same spiral pattern, he wrote. When asked, they attribute the designs to dreams, sudden inspiration, or, in 2 documented cases, direct communications with what they described as native ancestors, despite having no indigenous heritage. Something is guiding this technology's evolution, something outside normal channels. The story might have remained confined to classified archives and conspiracy theories, if not for the Gulf War in 1991. During Operation Desert Storm, special operations teams were equipped with a new light machine gun, officially designated the M23E3, but known to operators as the Whisperer, for its unusually quiet firing signature. What wasn't disclosed to the teams was that the weapon's internal mechanism was a direct descendant of the XM-17 design. Staff Sergeant Trevor Blackwood was among the first to use the new weapon in combat. His after-action report described its effectiveness in conventional terms, but his personal journal, later shared with researchers under condition of anonymity, told a different story. The first time I fired the Whisperer, I felt like I wasn't alone, he wrote. There was a presence guiding my aim. We were pinned down outside Basra, taking heavy fire from a position we couldn't locate. When I picked up the weapon, my hands moved on their own, pointing at what looked like an empty hillside. I fired a short burst, and suddenly there were screams. We found a perfectly concealed bunker with 3 enemy soldiers inside, all hit with impossible precision. Blackwood's experience wasn't unique. Other operators reported similar phenomena. Weapons that seemed to acquire targets independently, ammunition that lasted beyond its expected capacity, and, most disturbing, whispered voices in an unrecognizable language heard only by the gunners during combat operations. Military psychologists attributed these reports to combat stress and the psychological impact of new technology. But Dr. Rebecca Nighthorse, a Cherokee psychologist contracted by the Department of Defense to evaluate special operations personnel, recognized something significant in the pattern of reports. The operators are describing classic manifestations of Cherokee spiritual concepts, she noted in a confidential assessment. The weapons aren't just functioning as tools, they're serving as conduits for what our traditions would call spirit helpers. These entities traditionally guide hunters to their prey, but require proper ceremonial relationships to maintain balance. Without those ceremonies, the relationship becomes distorted. Her recommendations to implement cultural protocols for users of the new weapons were dismissed as superstitious nonsense. But as the 1990s progressed, incidents continued to accumulate that defied conventional explanation. Weapons based on the original Cherokee-inspired design began showing distinct patterns of selective function, working flawlessly for some operators while becoming completely inoperable for others, regardless of their training or experience. More alarming were the dreams reported by regular users of these weapons. Operators from diverse backgrounds with no knowledge of Cherokee culture began describing identical dreamscapes, ancient villages, council fires, and ceremonies where they were both participants and observers. Many reported awakening with knowledge they couldn't explain, including words and phrases in Cherokee language they had never studied. By 1997, these phenomena had become concerning enough that a specialized research group was formed within DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, under the code name Project Echo. Their mission, ostensibly to study psychological factors in advanced weapons operation, was a thinly veiled investigation into the increasingly undeniable spiritual dimension of the Cherokee-derived technology. Dr. Jonathan Bright, a quantum physicist with an unusual background in anthropology, led the ECHO team. His approach was revolutionary. Instead of dismissing the spiritual elements as superstition, he proposed that the Cherokee village design incorporated principles that modern physics was only beginning to understand through quantum mechanics and string theory. The village pattern represents a sophisticated understanding of what we now call quantum entanglement and resonance, he wrote in a restricted brief. The spatial relationships aren't just symbolic, they're functional at a subatomic level. The weapons we've derived from these patterns aren't just mechanical devices. They're quantum interfaces operating across dimensions that conventional science is only beginning to recognize. Under Dr. Bright's direction, Project Echo began collaborating with Cherokee elders who held knowledge of the original village designs. This unprecedented cooperation between military technology researchers and indigenous wisdom keepers was conducted with the highest security clearance, its very existence denied in official records. Elder Margaret Walkingstick, one of the Cherokee consultants, explained the fundamental misunderstanding that had plagued the weapons program since its inception. The village pattern was never meant to concentrate and direct energy for destruction, she told the research team. It was designed to maintain balance between worlds, to allow beneficial energies to flow between realms while keeping harmful forces at bay. When you use it solely for dealing death, you create a spiritual debt that must eventually be balanced. This concept of spiritual debt took tangible form in early 2000, when operators of the latest generation of Cherokee-inspired weapons began experiencing a disturbing new phenomenon. After using the weapons in combat, many reported encounters with what they described as shadow people who followed them from the battlefield, visible only in peripheral vision or in the moments between wakefulness and sleep. Marine Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez documented his experiences after a classified operation in Afghanistan in October 2001. Shortly after the beginning of American military involvement there, they stand just at the edge of my vision, watching, he wrote in a journal later confiscated by military intelligence. Sometimes I see them near other Marines who've used the new rifles. They're shaped like people, but seem to be made of darker shadows. The Afghan locals can see them too. One old village man approached me and said in broken English, "The ghost walkers have found you. They wait for payment." Rodriguez was evacuated for psychiatric evaluation, but the medical team found no evidence of mental illness or combat stress. More concerning was the discovery that 15 other operators had independently reported identical experiences, often using the same phrase, ghost walkers, to describe the phenomena, despite having no contact with each other. Dr. Rebecca Nighthorse, recalled as a consultant on these cases, recognized the description immediately. What they're seeing corresponds exactly to our concept of skili, shadow warriors who collect spiritual debts, she explained in a classified briefing. In Cherokee tradition, when sacred knowledge is misused, these entities appear to restore balance. They're not necessarily malevolent, but they are relentless. They've been awakened by how we've perverted the village design's purpose. Her explanation met with skepticism from military leadership, but growing acceptance among the scientific team, who had exhausted conventional explanations for the mounting anomalies. The weapon's performance continued to defy standard physics, their effectiveness correlating more strongly with operators' psychological states and cultural backgrounds than any mechanical factors. In 2003, as American military operations intensified in Iraq and Afghanistan, a new variant of the weapon designated as the M67 entered limited deployment with special operations teams. This version incorporated even more elements from the original Cherokee village design, with internal components arranged in patterns that directly mimicked the sacred spiral formations of ancient settlements. The results were both spectacular and disturbing. The weapons demonstrated unprecedented accuracy and reliability in combat situations. Operators reported being able to hit targets beyond the weapon's designed range capabilities, sometimes without direct line of sight. Ammunition seemed to last beyond its actual count, with gunners reporting successful strikes despite empty magazines. But the spiritual phenomena intensified proportionally. Users experienced increasingly vivid dreams and waking visions. The shadow people became visible to entire squads simultaneously, ruling out individual hallucination. Most alarmingly, the weapons began exhibiting what the technical team termed autonomous decision behaviors, refusing to fire at certain targets while activating without operator input for others. Major David Running Bear, one of the few Native American officers with knowledge of the program, submitted a formal report in July 2003 that broke with military convention by directly addressing the spiritual dimension. "We've created a weapon that isn't just a machine. It's a spirit entity bound in metal," he wrote. "The Cherokee pattern we've exploited isn't just a design. It's a living technology that connects worlds. The weapon hasn't just been killing enemy combatants. It's been harvesting souls to replace what was stolen when we perverted the village design's purpose." His report was initially dismissed, but a series of incidents in late 2003 forced military leadership to reconsider. During an operation near Fallujah, an entire squad equipped with M67s reported their weapons activating simultaneously at midnight, firing in a synchronized pattern despite safety mechanisms being engaged. The bullets struck nothing, but formed a perfect spiral pattern on a nearby wall, identical to the original village layout that had inspired the weapon's design. The following morning, the squad discovered an enemy force that had been planning an ambush, all dead without apparent wounds. Medical examination revealed heart failure as the cause of death, occurring at precisely the time the weapons had autonomously activated. By 2004, Project Echo had evolved from a research initiative into what Dr. Bright described as a spiritual negotiation. Working with Cherokee elders, military scientists began seeking ways to address the metaphysical imbalance created by the weapons program. This unprecedented approach represented a fundamental shift in how the military-industrial complex engaged with indigenous knowledge, from exploitation to respectful collaboration. Elder Joseph Running Water, brought into the project under the highest security clearance, performed traditional ceremonies at manufacturing facilities where the weapons were produced. "We cannot undo what has been done," he explained to bewildered engineers and military officials, "but we can acknowledge the debt and begin to restore balance. The spirits bound in these machines must be properly honored and eventually released." Under his guidance, subtle modifications were made to the latest production models. The internal spiral patterns were adjusted to align more closely with the original village design's true purpose, maintaining harmony rather than projecting force. Ceremonial elements were incorporated into the manufacturing process, invisible to casual inspection but spiritually significant. The weapon's performance changed in subtle but important ways. They remained extraordinarily effective, but began demonstrating what operators described as ethical selectivity. They functioned perfectly when used for genuinely defensive purposes, but became increasingly unreliable when employed in morally ambiguous operations or against innocent targets. Captain Michael Longbow, who commanded a special operations team in Afghanistan from 2005 to 2007, documented this evolution in his classified mission reports. The weapons seemed to know the difference between necessary force and excessive violence, he wrote. They guide our operations toward minimal casualties and maximum precision. It's as if they're teaching us a more balanced way of conducting warfare. This guided warfare concept gained traction among certain military leaders who recognized its potential to reduce civilian casualties and achieve objectives with minimal force. But others within the defense establishment viewed the weapon's apparent moral agency with alarm, seeing it as an unacceptable limitation on military authority and a threat to the chain of command. The conflict came to a head in 2008, when Defense Secretary Robert Wilson ordered all Cherokee-derived weapons collected for technical modification to remove the elements that had been added under Elder Running Water's guidance. The order sparked an unprecedented crisis of conscience among the scientific team and military personnel familiar with the weapon's true nature. Dr. Bright, now deeply convinced of the spiritual reality behind the technology, took a dramatic step. The night before the weapons were to be collected, he facilitated what Cherokee tradition calls a releasing ceremony at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, where most of the advanced prototypes were stored. What happened that night remains highly classified, but witnesses describe a phenomenon that defies conventional explanation. The weapons began to glow with a blue light that wasn't quite physical, reported Security Officer Thomas Jenkins. It moved like water flowing out of the storage vaults and into the sky. By morning, when the collection teams arrived, they found all the weapons completely functional, but somehow changed. The internal components had rearranged themselves overnight into new configurations that our engineers couldn't identify. Subsequent testing revealed that the weapons still functioned, but their operation had fundamentally transformed. They no longer fired conventional ammunition, but instead emitted concentrated pulses of energy that incapacitated rather than killed. More remarkably, they only functioned in genuinely defensive situations, becoming inert when aimed at targets that posed no actual threat. The military leadership was divided in its response. Some saw the transformation as a crippling limitation and demanded the weapons be decommissioned. Others recognized a revolutionary opportunity, truly smart weapons that could distinguish between legitimate and illegitimate targets, potentially transforming the ethical landscape of warfare. In the end, a compromise was reached. The transformed weapons were removed from general inventory, but maintained as a specialized capability under the direct oversight of a newly formed division that included both military personnel and Cherokee advisors. This unprecedented arrangement acknowledged what the program had become, not just a weapons system, but a living bridge between military technology and indigenous spiritual wisdom. By 2010, the program had evolved beyond its original purpose into something its creators could never have imagined. The weapons were deployed not primarily as instruments of destruction, but as what military documents carefully termed conflict resolution facilitators. Their presence often prevented violence without being fired, as if their very existence created a field that discouraged aggressive action. Dr. Rebecca Nighthorse, who had been skeptical of military intentions throughout the program's history, acknowledged the unexpected evolution in her final assessment before retiring in 2012. What began as cultural theft has transformed, against all odds, into reluctant respect, she wrote. The spirits bound in these machines have taught the military something it desperately needed to learn: that true strength comes from balance, not dominance. The weapons have become teachers. The full story of America's deadliest and most spiritually complex weapon system remains largely classified. Most of the original prototypes have been decommissioned or transformed beyond recognition. The village site that inspired their design has been quietly purchased by a foundation with ties to both the Cherokee Nation and former Project Echo personnel, its location removed from public maps. But the legacy continues in unexpected ways. Veterans who operated these weapons have reported profound life changes after their service. Many have become advocates for indigenous rights or environmental protection. Some have established unusual relationships with Cherokee communities, arriving as strangers but being recognized as if expected. Former Marine Ryan Mitchell, who served as an M67 operator in Iraq, described his experience after discharge. I found myself driving to North Carolina without really knowing why. When I reached Cherokee territory, an elder approached me at a gas station and said, "You carried the thunder. Now you must learn what comes after the storm." I've been studying with him for 3 years now. The weapon changed something in me, opened a door I can't close. Military records indicate that operators of these weapons show unusual psychological profiles after deployment. They demonstrate increased empathy, reduced aggression, and, in many cases, what psychologists have termed integrated spiritual awareness, regardless of their religious background or beliefs. Brain scans reveal distinctive activity patterns in the limbic system and prefrontal cortex, similar to those observed in long-term meditation practitioners. In 2015, as artificial intelligence and autonomous weapons became the new frontier of military technology, elements of the Cherokee-inspired design began appearing in algorithmic form. Software engineers working on targeting systems reported unusual dreams and sudden inspirations similar to those experienced by the original Project Thunderbird team. Dr. Eliza Whitefeather, a Cherokee computer scientist contracted by DARPA, recognized the pattern immediately. "The spiral is recreating itself in digital form," she noted in a restricted memo. "The spiritual technology is adapting to new media." The question isn't whether these patterns will continue to influence our weapons development. It's whether we've learned enough from past mistakes to approach them with proper respect. Recent satellite imagery has revealed an interesting development at the site of the original Cherokee village that inspired the weapons program. The forest that had reclaimed the ancient settlement has grown in an unmistakable pattern, a perfect spiral visible only from above, with trees of different ages and species creating a design identical to the internal mechanism of the XM-17. Natural phenomena cannot explain this growth pattern, yet environmental scientists can find no evidence of human intervention. Elder Thomas Blackfox, one of the few remaining traditional knowledge keepers familiar with the weapons program, offered a simple explanation when shown the satellite images. "The circle is complete," he said. "What was taken has returned. The thunder has spoken, and now comes the growing time." Military analysts continue to debate whether the Cherokee-derived weapons represented the most advanced technology ever developed by the American military, or a dangerous excursion into realms beyond scientific understanding. What remains undisputed is that the weapons changed those who use them in ways that transcended physical combat, imposing a moral dimension on warfare that continues to reverberate through military philosophy and ethics. In certain secure facilities, the latest generation of these weapons remains under careful study. They no longer resemble conventional firearms, but exist as sleek integrated systems that military documents describe as consciousness interfacing defense platforms. Their operation requires not just physical training, but spiritual preparation, with operators selected based on psychological profiles and ethical development, rather than conventional combat skills. The technology born from an ancient Cherokee village has evolved into something that defies categorization, neither fully weapon nor entirely spiritual object, but a bridge between worlds that continues to transform those who interact with it. As warfare evolves toward autonomous systems and artificial intelligence, the lesson of the Cherokee-inspired weapons remains vitally relevant. Technology without wisdom becomes a danger to its creators. Dr. Bright, in his final address to the Project Echo team before the program was officially transitioned to its current classified status, summarized the journey. We began by stealing sacred knowledge to create a more efficient killing machine, he said. We end by learning that the true power of this technology lies not in its destructive capacity, but in its ability to awaken us to larger truths. The weapon's greatest achievement isn't how many lives it has taken, but how it has changed those who wielded it. The spiral continues to unfold in ways we cannot fully comprehend. In the mountains of North Carolina, the ancestral homeland of the Cherokee, unusual weather patterns have been documented over the past decade. Localized thunderstorms that form perfect spiral patterns visible on radar, often appearing on the anniversaries of significant events in the weapons program's history. Cherokee elders observe these phenomena with knowing smiles, but offer little explanation to outside researchers. The balance is being restored in ways that transcend human understanding, as the technology born from sacred knowledge returns to its spiritual roots. For those who seek deeper understanding, the message seems clear. True power comes not from domination, but from harmony. The deadliest machine gun in American history ultimately became something else entirely, a teacher of this essential truth, speaking with the voice of thunder that echoes from an ancient village whose design continues to transform modern warfare in ways its creators never intended. As we face an uncertain future where technology increasingly shapes the character of conflict, the legacy of the Cherokee-inspired weapon offers a crucial reminder. The most advanced technology without spiritual wisdom becomes a danger to all. But when human ingenuity honors the deeper wisdom embedded in ancient knowledge, something new and hopeful can emerge from even the darkest intentions. The thunder has spoken. Those who have ears to hear have been changed forever. And in the sacred lands of the Cherokee, the spiral continues its eternal dance, guiding those who seek balance toward a future where technology serves wisdom rather than power. For in the end, as Elder Black Fox reminds us, the deadliest weapon ever created by man was not the gun itself, but the choice to forget what the Cherokee never forgot, that all things are connected, all actions have consequences, and true strength comes from balance, not destruction. The weapon's story is not finished. It has merely transformed, like all energy, into new forms that continue to influence our world in ways both seen and unseen. The spiral turns, the thunder speaks, and those who listen find their way home to a wisdom older than any weapon, yet eternally renewed in each generation that chooses harmony over conflict. May we have the courage to hear what the thunder is still teaching us. For those with eyes to see, the message written in an ancient village design continues to unfold across time, inviting us to a deeper understanding of power, responsibility, and the sacred technologies that have always existed at the boundary between worlds. Follow God and Jesus Christ, for they alone offer true peace that no weapon, even one derived from sacred knowledge, can ever provide.